Okay, a lot of news and notes as it relates to quarterbacks here in the last handful of days. Told you a little earlier, part of what we're trying to do when it comes to quarterbacks is we're trying to kind of package them up 3, 4, maybe 5 at a time. Because if we did a standalone segment for every guy, we would have more content that we'd even know what to do with. And by the way, it could become outdated in a heartbeat because a guy could decide to enter the portal, exit the portal, then jump back in the portal only to exit again. Like we could have some Brew McCoys in the quarterback mixes. Remember, he was at like 6 different schools before he ever played. Now has, of course, had a great year at Tennessee. So this is how we're handling it. We're just kind of packaging up quarterback news in groups of 4 and 5. If we don't get to your guy today, don't worry, check back in a bit. We'll probably get to it. Let's start with a guy that has had a phenomenal season. He has announced that he's going to the NFL draft. But his words, not mine, still have business to take care of. That's Max Duggan, the quarterback of TCU. He's had a terrific year. Should come as no surprise that he is deciding to forego his final year of eligibility in an effort to become a professional a little earlier. Let's be honest. Is he really going to improve his draft stock next year after what he did this year? He doesn't have great length, but at 6'2", 210 with some mobility, I think he's got a chance to catch on somewhere very quickly. And I think so many people in an era in which we're still trying to get to the bottom of the competitiveness, how much they love football, how like all these other things, all these question marks that you have to ask when it comes to the quarterback position specifically, we know that Max Duggan loves to compete. We know that he has also had to overcome tremendous adversity in his career in an effort to get to this point, so he doesn't take anything for granted. Where will he come off the board? I don't know. I'm not an NFL draft expert. I don't look at the rounds and the mock-ups and things like that. He feels to me like a day 2 guy, maybe late day 2, early day 3. But ultimately, it's going to come down to how does he run? How does he throw in the combine when measured up against some of the other guys? I think he has plenty of arm, and I think he is really accurate. But I also think there will be knocks on him because people will say, well, you had some ups and downs in your career, and you're the product of a system that's extremely quarterback friendly. So I do think people will knock him, but either way. Also, by the way, when are we now putting out graphics for announcing that you're declaring for the NFL draft, but you're not going just yet? Like, what's the point in putting it out today? I don't know. But either way, Max Duggan has officially announced that he's going to head to the NFL. But like I said at the very beginning, quote, we still have business to take care of, end quote, meaning he's obviously going to play in the college football playoff game against the Michigan Wolverines. He finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting, man. What a great year for Max Duggan. We wish him well as he translates to the next level, but hopefully for him and for TCU fans everywhere, 2 more games before that official decision is made. Moving on next to a quarterback that also had a terrific year. Some people thought he might actually enter the NFL draft, but ultimately he decided to come back to school. Bo Nix has officially announced that he will return to the Oregon Ducks. Now, it was pretty cool, the video that they put out. It should come as no surprise. This came late on Sunday night that he was going to be returning in Oregon. Check it out on Twitter. Pretty cool little graphic that they were able to put together. But I'll say this, it's pretty awesome to me to see that this is a young man that could have potentially had his name called in the 2nd or 3rd round, but the upside is there. The guy had a great year. So, unlike some others, he knows that even though Max Duggan, for instance, if Max Duggan came back, he's probably a 3rd rounder, 4th rounder this year, probably going to be a 3rd or 4th rounder next year as well. But if you look at Bo Nix, he's probably a 3rd rounder this year, but if he came back, he could be an early 2nd, even a 1st round pick, who knows, even a top 10 pick, depending on his development here over the next 12 months. So I like that he came back acknowledging that there's still a lot of value to be created on the first contract. The other thing I love too is this was a guy in Bo Nix that committed to a school. And you're going to say, well, hey, hang on a second. What do you mean? He committed to a school. He committed to a university. And part of the reason why he committed to that university was because of Kenny Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham was the offensive coordinator there at Oregon all season long. Of course, had worked with Bo Nix before, had created and developed a great relationship with Bo Nix over the time of his recruitment, and obviously in the last 12 months when he decided to call Oregon home. But when Kenny Dillingham left to go become the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils, there was real legitimate question marks about whether or not Bo Nix would say, man, I don't know if I want to start from scratch, do it all over again with a new guy that I'm not familiar with. I don't know if I want to go back and do this again. Maybe I go and transfer, play my final year at Arizona State with a coach that I'm very familiar with. Maybe I go to the NFL, and even if I give up a couple spots in the draft, then so be it. At least the most recent tape that I put out there for the scouts was pretty good tape, even though it got a little banged up down the stretch. But if you think about what he accomplished this year, nearly 4,000 total yards of offense, 41 touchdowns, all while leading them to a 9-3 record in what was a resurgent year in the Pac-12 for so many different teams. Now, still has some, quote, unfinished business to take care of. Didn't play as well down the stretch, but also got a little banged up down the stretch. But either way, him returning to Oregon for 2023 immediately makes them probably not the favorite. USC will likely be the favorite with what they bring back. But Oregon, at the very worst, maybe second or third in the Pac-12 when it comes to the preseason prognostications. So great that Bo Nix returned. It's a huge coup for Oregon. And I also think it's a really interesting deal there in the Pac-12 as far as the pecking order is concerned. Another notable quarterback entered the portal a while ago, by the way, and now has found a home on the other side. Quarterback Jeff Sims has committed to Nebraska. Originally, as he went through the recruiting process, he was originally committed to Florida State. Well, late in the process, he decided to shift quickly and not transfer, but decommit from Florida State and commit to Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech. And in his career, he's done some pretty nice things on subpar teams. He's thrown for nearly 4,500 yards, has had 30 touchdowns, has had 23 interceptions to go for it, but he also has added 1,200 yards on the ground and 11 touchdowns as well. So statistically speaking, a guy that never really reached his ceiling, but my goodness, is the talent there. He has unbelievable mobility. He's bulked up quite a bit in the last couple of years, so he's developed into a more physically mature athlete. But here's the issue with Jeff Sims. One, he struggles at times with inconsistent decision-making. Two, he's also been a little bit inconsistent throwing the football as far as his accuracy is concerned and misses throws that he shouldn't miss. But the ceiling remains insanely high. Now, you get him there in Lincoln with Matt Rule and with that quarterback group, and you look at where they're at from a quarterback depth standpoint, this is a situation where he could very easily step right in and become the starting quarterback day one. I also think, too, it's going to be a little bit interesting. If you look at what Matt Rule was at both Temple and Baylor, they didn't often utilize, now they had it, but they didn't often utilize heavy quarterback run. One of Jeff Sims' best attributes is his ability to create with his legs and be involved in the run game. So it'll be really interesting. They've also, by the way, they've hosted Malik Hornsby, the transfer from Arkansas, on a visit over the last couple weeks as well. So maybe it's a little bit of an indicator as to what this offense is going to look like under the new staff. I'm very excited about what Matt Rule is going to do. You know that. I mean, I have talked for a while about how much of a massive difference maker he is when it comes to being able to coach and change and adjust all the different aspects of where they're at. But now with the new staff, a new regime, implementing a new system and all these other things, man, having a guy with a talent level like Jeff Sims could go a long way in allowing this transition to be a little bit more smooth. So we also know too that Jeff Sims was a highly regarded prospect and a lot of people were in on his recruitment. There are question marks, like I alluded to. He is not a flawless prospect by any stretch of the imagination, but he was highly desirable to a lot of different schools. It further proves that Nebraska can not just attract players, but they're a huge player in the NIL world as well. And I would imagine that NIL probably factored into this decision because Jeff Sims had other suitors. So congrats to Nebraska. Congrats to Jeff Sims, and fingers crossed, hopefully, he can be the guy that revitalizes this very, very proud program. Other quarterback news and notes. Haynes King, formerly of Texas A&M. Y'all remember, this young man has been the opening day starter for the last 2 years for the Aggies, but unfortunately for him, he hasn't been able to retain control of the job. He entered the portal on December 2nd as a graduate transfer. He's thrown for over 1,200 yards. The problem is decision-making with Haynes King and occasional sporadic accuracy. 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, but in addition to those 7 touchdowns, he also has 6 interceptions. He also, of course, too, has a little bit of an injury history. Got banged up and missed all of the year for the most part there in 2021. Got a little banged up this year as well. So it's going to be really important for him to kind of get back on solid footing, and he has officially announced that he's going to be attending Georgia Tech. Now, what does this mean for Georgia Tech? He's a little bit like Jeff Sims. They're awfully similar. Amazing track star speed, great explosiveness with the ball in his hands, but the accuracy from time to time is a little bit hit or miss, and he does have a tendency to not just throw picks, but he'll put the ball on the deck as well. Haynes King's got to clean up his ball control, but the upside is there. Jimbo Fisher has long raved about what this young man can do at the line of scrimmage as well. Great football acumen, son of a coach there in Longview High School in Texas. So remember, this guy also has crazy track star speed. He anchored the 4x1 of the Texas State Championship track 4x1 team. Like, we can flat out roll. We're talking about 10-5, 10-400 guys. So he could flat out roll Olympic level speed. Maybe not like top levels of Olympics, but we're talking about a guy that can flat out get it with the ball in his hands. So he will be interesting piece to add. Now, if they can just hone up his accuracy a bit and get him to stop throwing into traffic, he could become a very solid starter for Georgia Tech here in the near future. And then finally, UCLA has found the quarterback that is likely or potentially going to replace Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They went to the portal, they evaluated the entire world, it felt like, and they have determined that Colin Schlee is going to be their guy. I think they had other offers out there. If you read between the lines and you look at who was kind of flirting with UCLA, sounds like they were in on a few different guys, but Colin Schlee ultimately is the guy that's going to go to UCLA. Says committed, put out the graphic on Saturday night. Now, he's a junior, threw for over 2,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, but it's also what he can do with his legs. If you look at UCLA's offense, a lot of it is predicated by using quarterback run. A lot of it is predicated by the quarterback making post-snap decisions in the RPO game. Now, first 2 years didn't have a lot of opportunities, but had a bit of a breakout year this year in leading Kent State. And it's understandable that he would enter the portal too, because Sean Lewis, his head coach, most recently left for Colorado. I believe Colorado probably not in on Colin Schlee, though, because they have Shedeur Sanders, and Deion Sanders, of course, is probably going to prioritize his son over just about everybody else. So 9-3 season for Chip Kelly last year. They're going to be losing DTR after 5 years. I mean, the guy has been starting at UCLA for a really long time, but it does feel as though Schlee is stepping into a fairly good situation. Remember, DTR this year took some significant strides, accounted for over 2,800 yards throwing it, 25 touchdowns through the air as well, but also added 600 yards rushing and 11 rushing touchdowns. They also, UCLA, he's going to be in a quarterback competition. They got the 4-star Justin Martin that's going to be arriving here in a couple weeks, and they also have the redshirt sophomore Ethan Garbers, who was the backup last season. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly who emerges from that quarterback derby. But Colin Schlee, a prospect with decent upside coming from Kent State, is going to be heading to Westwood to be a part of the Bruins.